It is 2:45, and I suggest we get started. Welcome to the introduction of the study program Forestry System Transformation. When I see the list of participants, it is quite easy to grasp. So welcome, Anna. Nice to have you with us at this beautiful and sunny day, at least in Eberswalde and in Berlin. My name is Carsten Mann. I'm professor for forest resource economics at Eberswalde University, and I'm heading the study program Forestry System Transformation, which I will introduce to you in the next, 15 to 20 minutes or so. So let's get started. Forestry System Transformation. It is basically a title for a study program that is not really self-explaining. So it's forestry. This is something more than just a forest. It is even a forestry system. So we talk about forest ecosystems, but also we talk about management approaches. We talk about people. We talk about the society, maybe the political setup, the economic setup. So everything that can be subsumed under the idea of what makes up a forestry system, and transformation. So transformation as a term that emerged in the past 15, 20 years, referring to changes towards the better, often in relation towards sustainable development. So basically it's a study program that deals with ideas, so what needs to be changed in current forestry systems in order to work more smoothly, in order to work more oriented towards societal demands. And in fact, this is what we do. So the central question of FST is what needs to be done in order to sustainably provide the right range of forest ecosystem services. So I'm not sure what's your background in forestry, but forests do have various functions we as a society consider helpful. They provide us, of course, resources like timber or non-timber forest products, but they also provide us various further products and services such as water regulation and carbon storage and the biodiversity habitat, but also they provide us a nice space to go and to recreate. They are often a very dominant aspect of a landscape that provides us some cultural identity, maybe as a place for spiritual enrichment. And these are all functions and services that are subsumed under the term of forest ecosystem services as the products of the services of a forest we somehow as a society need for our well-being. And the question is, okay, how can this wide range of services be sustainably provided? And this idea is not really new, that a forest has various functions and provides all these various services. But when we look into reality, when we look into practice, we can see that some of these services are really in the foreground when it comes to the management. Classically, this is management for timber production, while other services are more backgrounded or under provisioned or under provided. And this has various reasons we can state as challenges, as you can see on the slide here. So when we talk about forest ecosystems, we can see that these are quite diverse. So we have different type of forest ecosystems. We can see that even nearby to Eberswalde, here we find different type of forests, and the more we upscale to regional, national, or even to international scale, the more diverse forest ecosystems are. and that means also the provision of forest ecosystem services ranges and differs in these services. Also, most of the forests, at least in Germany, but I think also on a global scale, are managed. And we can see that also the management systems and, let's say, the institutional setup, so all the different rules that determine how a forest should be managed, different policies, for example, as defined in the forestry law, but also laws that are regulating biodiversity conservation or climate protection. And these are also very diverse, and also the management objectives are very diverse. Then we can say, from a scientific point of view, we also have to deal with quite some serious knowledge gaps. So there is an idea that forests do provide different functions, that there are these services, that these services are important for society. But what is exactly the relation? So where do we exactly get satisfaction out of, and how come, and where are the beneficiaries of certain services, and where are the providers, and how to match demand and supply of these services. Here there's a lot of uncertainty involved. And also, if we think of the nature of some of these services, we can see that many of them have the character of being public goods. There are only very few that have the character of a private good. And private good means always this is something where I can determine a price and where there is a market. So for timber, when I have fir, for example, I can pretty closely define how much worth is the monetary value of this piece of timber. But when it comes to services such as biodiversity, habitat, or the recreational value of a forest for us, then it becomes quite complex. It becomes challenging not only on methodological and technical side, so how to determine a value, is it only a monetary value, but or are there many more values existing, and how to measure these? This is quite demanding, and this is also a very sensitive topic, because very often when we think of, well, how can we determine the value of a forest in its totality, then often the first idea is, but then you put a price tag on everything, and now suddenly people have to pay when they enter the forest. And this is not the case. It is more to symbolize that, well, the provision of these services is associated with some costs. And so that makes this topic quite a sensitive political topic. But when we look around, we can find quite many good examples where different type of forest ecosystem services are provided through forest management. We find examples of suddenly we have a climate forest, we have recreation forests, we have something like a therapy forest, so kind of new labels, let's say, that did not exist as such just 10, 15 years ago. And we find these examples, and our interest is, well, how come that these good examples exist, and what are the required conditions that they exist? And we need to learn from them. But they are often very local, and they exist only in niche and not really in the mainstream. So in this study program, in FST, we take this question serious. So what needs to be done? What needs to be changed if we want to sustainably provide this wide range of forest ecosystem services? And we approach this question from different angles. So we have a look at kind of what is out there in terms of forest management and planning approaches in order to foster certain forest ecosystem services. We need to identify and to assess different national up to global trends and impacts that are ongoing, that pose different demands on forest uses. So when we think of just the past decades, it was very high on the international policy agenda that forests are important for climate protection. So as a source for carbon storage, for example. Similarly, we have a trend on bioeconomy. So suddenly there's a huge trend demanding for even more timber resources and the substitution of non-renewable resources by renewable ones like timber. That also induce some pressure and some concurrence on the ground. And so we need to understand these different trends and what they mean for the management and for the choice of decisions I have when it comes to forest. We have to have a look at the policy setup, what kind of policies and policy strategies exist, but also what different type of business models exist. What do we find out there when it comes to FES provision? Like when you think maybe the most obvious is that we have a carbon market since a few years or a decade running, but there are further other incentive-based, we call that, or market-based mechanisms in order to motivate actors to do something else with their forest instead of cutting it down. So we need to understand. We need to understand the different methods for how to deal with these different interests society has in forest, how to deal with conflicts. And there is a huge ton of conflicts out there when it comes to ideas of what should be done with the forest, how should a forest be managed, and to identify the various trade-offs. As a forest, as you might know, is limited in its scope, and so it cannot provide everything at the same time. At the end, it's a decision that needs to be felt, and the more transparent this decision is, the better is its acceptance. And then we need to understand kind of the possibilities for fostering such successful management or governance innovations and conditions of how a forestry system might be transformed towards the wider provision of FES. In a nutshell, FST, it's a consecutive master program for graduates with a focus on forestry. So in its core, FST is a forestry program, but it has quite a particular focus. If you want, it has a focus on socioeconomics and a system-based understanding. I will elaborate this in a second. And therefore, we think we also have content that is more rooted in political sciences, that is rooted in different economic approaches, that is rooted in an innovation understanding. And therefore, we broadened the range of, let's say, backgrounds for students. Also, we allow students that have a background in some kind of natural resource management, like from agriculture, for example, water management, but also from environmental sciences. So somehow you all should have heard about issues of natural resource management. Ideally, you have some more elaborated knowledge in forestry, but I think it is not urgently needed. So as long as you have some background in natural resource management and environmental sciences, you should be good. And the reason is why we open up is that FST is in its deep core a very inter and transdisciplinary study program. So interdisciplinary here means covering a range of different scientific disciplines, not only from natural sciences, but also and in particular from social sciences. And transdisciplinary refers to ideas of also including practitioners, of including lay knowledge, of including demands and knowledge from the wider society. And we try to assess this and to integrate it in our program. FST starts every year in the winter semester. It has a duration of 4 semesters, like nearly all master programs. These days, we have a cap of 25 study places, and the language we talk and we teach is English. It's entirely in English. There are some occasions where we meet practice partners especially here in Germany, or when we enter a policy event in Berlin that might be in German, but we try to avoid it. And all lecture material, all readings, all books, everything is rooted consequently in English. So therefore, you need a proof of your English skills. I talked about that FST is an interdisciplinary study program, and here you see its structure. And basically, when we think of thematic blocks or thematic areas, FST builds on 4 of them. The first area is we talk and you will learn about issues that are rooted in forest resource management, so different forest management strategies, for example. A second block is more rooted in environmental economics, and we even go a step further and we elaborate especially issues of ecological economics that try to place economic activities within the planetary boundaries and assess how an economic system needs to adapt to these planetary boundaries. The third column, the third area, is rooted in governance and policy. So here you will learn about different political sciences concepts that explain different actors, that explains belief, that explains mechanisms, what makes a problem, and how to define and come up with a solution. And the fourth block is rooted in innovation and potential. So if we think of changing a system, we also need to think of the role of different innovation, technological innovations, but also social innovation, policy innovation, and so on. And these 4 blocks are all weighted the same in FST. So you see here we have the forestry issues, but we back them with ideas rooted in economics, in policy, and in innovation studies. And what you see here on this slide is, let's say, the study structure of the first 2 semesters. So the first 2 semesters are set up for you to provide you background knowledge on different scientific concepts, on different methods, on different insights of forest ecosystem service and related forest management, let's say. And you can see here, they are all weighted the same. Like we start in forest resource management with future management systems, where you will learn about strategic silvicultural planning and management approaches. Then we have a block on ecological economics called Rethinking Environmental Economics, where you will be introduced to different schools of economics, different concepts, the idea of ecosystem services, functions, and valuation, followed by a class on governance and policy. So here the first one, institutions, actors, natural resource related policy fields, and one of innovation and potentials. And you see here in the first semester, we kind of are more rooted in the assessment of the status quo. So to carry out, where are we in the moment? What looks the status like? How come that we find conditions as we find them today? What strategies are out there? What tools are out there? What visions are out there? And then in the second semester, we turn more towards a transformative perspective and to kind of elaborate the space for action, let's say. What you see else is that all these thematic blocks are valued the same. That means they are all, in the moment, they are all in the structure of block modules for the duration of 2 weeks. Starting in the winter terms, we will extend them to 3-week modules. So we have 3-week modules, forest resource management, and 3 weeks of ecological economics, 3 weeks of policy, and so on. And what you see here in the lighter color, is our deepening areas. So you have, or specialization areas. You have in FST the chance, if you want to specialize in a certain field, to do that. And in order to specialize, we offer you, besides these mandatory modules, also a set of elective modules. And these elective modules, there are basically 2 per semester. And they're either rooted here in related to forest management, like forest management strategies for ecosystem service provision, or related to transformation and innovation. So hang on. See, that is the issue in home office. And in order to get this specialization, you need to select 2 of these elective modules in a row. Okay, but you will get there. It's not a big deal. And the idea is that in each of these, let's say, perspectives, in each of these modules, we have a look at forestry systems, and then what needs to be changed in a forestry system in order to take the idea of the provision of forest ecosystem service seriously. What can be done with regard to forest management? What can be done with regard to the economic reference system? So, for example, that there's only a market for timber, but how to acknowledge also these public good services that are so important for society. How can we bring them to the fore? How can we make them important also in decision making? We take a look from the policy side. So what policy backup is needed, for example, in order to change this perception of forest and the meaning of a forest, and how can we unlock the innovation potentials of a forestry system in order to provide the range of forest ecosystem services. These first 2 semesters, as I said, we have these different modules. Of course, we try to also bring you as much insights from practice to the classroom, and sometimes we go with the classroom to the practice. Of course, we don't go on a field trip every day, but we have a few occasions where we do this. So an advantage of being in Eberswalde is that we are very close to Berlin. And from a political side, Berlin is the place where often political strategies are formed. And so we often, or when there's a chance to join a policy event, like here it was the introduction of the National Biodiversity Strategy, we go there and we listen how these political interfaces are created and how they are functioning. We have in the beginning of the course, as a team building event, we go to a forest climbing park and in order to experience also a new business model. I mean, that is kind of the label we use, but at the end, it's also fun being there and to get to know each other. Here we have an exercise in a class on forest ecosystem services on forest therapy, where we go out in the forest with a therapist and we kind of learn about the different approaches, but we also have a look and we go with different practice partners and we learn about here, for example, a business model of a climate forest and how to finance, how to plant a finance model, or how to manage a biosphere reserve. So whenever possible, we try to get these linkages to practice. I was mainly talking about the first 2 semesters. The third semester is basically the chance where you can get into practice. It is a project semester where you are free to look for either an internship or a research project you are interested in and you want to elaborate and deepen, and you can do that. It's kind of a protected space to deepen a topic of relevance. And of course, we help you finding it and conducting it. And the 4th semester is dedicated then to the master thesis. Fields of work. FST is a newer study program. And due to its inter and transdisciplinary character, it is a master program that is not educating for the one job market, but basically we see for you a range of job possibilities which are open for you later. One big block is that all different type of companies that emerge right now in the bioeconomy trend. And there are so many firms that are start to grasp and to go on the market that are depending on sustainable resource management. And we think this is a newly emerging job market. And from our assessments, like graduates from FST, which have a background in or being able to connect natural and social sciences, being able to understand policy agendas, being able to understand economic systems, are well suitable for that. However, I also have to say that now we have the first generation of graduates. So we are collecting experiences right now. Yeah, it's basically, there's a range of companies open. So in the area of bioeconomy, of course, you find options in the forestry and the timber industry. We see a large potential working as a policy consultancy later. So working on national and international level organizations. Of course, certification is an issue. And the market is always open for you to work as a freelancer or also to deepen a career as a scientist. As now at HNEE, we also have a new graduate program that provides you infrastructures, at least to conduct a PhD. What else? Yes. So that was a very rough and quick introduction. You find much more elaborated information on our FST webpage. We have a flyer that is kind of summarizing same information as you got today. But on the webpage, you find also some experiences from students who are studying it from field trips. You find the module handbooks, the curriculum, and so on. Yes. And that was already 25 minutes talking from my side. I hope I could give you at least an idea of FST. Perhaps you become interested in the study program. Maybe one thing I forgot, we are very international. Like we started 2018 with something like 17 students. The past years, we were always full. And also the amount of internationals really coming from all over the world steeply rose. And it's a very enriching, it's very inspiring environment as it is living also from this international atmosphere. So we are looking forward to welcoming you at HNEE and to the FST program. And I'm happy to answer also your questions.